"Get out of my office now, or you will regret this. We don't serve frauds like you," the bank manager, Jennifer, shouted aggressively at the black woman in her office. The black woman, Gabriella, remained calm and unreluctant to leave, but the sudden, violent movement caught Gabriella off guard. Despite her composed exterior, she hadn't expected to be physically assaulted in a bank, a public institution, in broad daylight. The force of their grip caused her to lose hold of her phone, which clattered to the floor and skidded beneath Jennifer's desk, effectively eliminating her ability to document what was happening. Soon, sharp steel scissors sliced through her meticulously crafted braids, each strand falling to the cold marble floor of a prestigious bank. The sound of a professional woman's muffled sobs as she's restrained by men twice her size. All while customers and employees watch in stunned silence. She had come to request for normal banking services, but instead, her dignity was taken away from her grind. But what these bank employees didn't know was who they were really humiliating that day, and how much power she had when the woman they thought was a powerless black woman on braids finally revealed who she really was. Before we go deeper into this shocking story, hit that subscribe button now, and if you stand against discrimination, type it in the comments and tell us what country you're watching from. Gabriella Washington wasn't just any customer walking into Premier Financial that fateful morning. The day had started like any other for Gabriella. She carefully styled her natural hair, a crown of beautifully crafted box braids that had taken 8 hours to complete the previous weekend. Before we continue, I want to ask you, what would you have done if you witnessed what happened to Gabriella that day? Would you have spoken up? Or remained silent like the other customers? The bystander effect is powerful, but so is the voice of just one person willing to stand against injustice. Gabriella Washington. At 38 years old, she embodied excellence in everything she did. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Detroit, Gabriella learned early that she would need to work twice as hard to get half as far. By her mid-30s, Gabriella had become a sought-after executive in the financial world. Her name appeared regularly in Fortune and Forbes, celebrating her innovative approaches to ethical investing. When Premier Financial Bank's board began searching for fresh leadership to modernize their institution, Gabriella's name topped their list. After months of negotiations, Gabriella agreed to join Premier Financial's board with the understanding that she would soon transition into the CEO position. The current board members were impressed by her vision for community-focused banking that remained highly profitable. What the board didn't know was Gabriella's personal commitment to transparency and authenticity in leadership. 2 weeks before her official announcement as incoming CEO, Gabriella made an unusual decision. Rather than relying solely on reports and statistics, she would visit several Premier Financial branches incognito to experience their service as an ordinary customer would. "You can't fix what you don't understand," she told her assistant, "and you can't understand what you haven't experienced." This wasn't a publicity stunt. No cameras would follow her. No press release would announce her findings. This was Gabriella's personal methodology: to witness the truth before attempting to reshape it. She had used this approach throughout her career, learning more from these unannounced visits than from months of formal meetings. Gabriella selected 5 branches to visit, including the Westfield location. The Westfield branch of Premier Financial sat in the heart of an affluent suburb, its imposing limestone facade projecting stability and tradition. For 15 years, branch manager Jennifer Pierce had run this location with what the regional director called impressive efficiency. What they didn't see was that Jennifer had created a culture where certain customers received royal treatment, while others were subtly discouraged from banking there. Jennifer Pierce, with her perfectly highlighted blonde hair and country club connections, had transformed a public financial institution into her personal fiefdom, where she alone determined who was worthy of the bank's services. As a Black woman, Gabriella's hair journey had been deeply personal and political. Throughout college and the early years of her career, she had chemically straightened her natural curls, spending thousands of dollars and countless hours maintaining a look that corporate America deemed professional. The burns on her scalp, the damaged edges, the constant maintenance, all were considered necessary sacrifices for success in the financial world. But 3 years ago, after reaching a position of influence, Gabriella made a decision. She would no longer compromise her identity for corporate acceptance. She let her relaxer grow out and began wearing her hair in its natural state. The transition wasn't easy. She noticed the subtle changes in how colleagues addressed her, the microaggressions that suggested her new appearance was somehow less professional. But Gabriella stood firm in her decision. That morning, she selected a conservative charcoal gray pantsuit and minimal jewelry, an outfit that would make her look like any other business professional seeking banking services. No designer labels, no status watches, nothing that would signal her true position in the financial world. Looking in the mirror one final time, Gabriella reminded herself of her purpose. This was about ensuring that Premier Financial Bank truly served all communities equally under her leadership. Time to see what's really happening when no one thinks the boss is watching, she said to her reflection. What Gabriella couldn't know was that her decision to enter the Westfield branch as an ordinary customer would set in motion events that would forever change not just Premier Financial, but her own life as well. As Gabriella Washington pulled into the parking lot of Premier Financial's Westfield branch, she checked her reflection one last time in the rearview mirror, adjusting her conservative charcoal gray pantsuit. No designer labels, no expensive accessories, nothing that would betray her true position in the financial world. Today, she was simply a professional woman seeking banking services. Her box braids were neatly styled, framing her face with dignified elegance. With quiet confidence, Gabriella stepped out of her modest rental car and approached the entrance. She carried a simple leather portfolio containing fictitious business plans she had prepared for this visit, documents for a community development project she would pretend to seek funding for. It was a test she had designed specifically to assess how the bank treated entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. The interior was impeccable. Leather seating areas, mahogany desks, digital displays showcasing the bank's investment services. Everything conveyed prosperity and exclusivity. 3 teller windows were open, each with short lines of customers. To the right, a reception desk controlled access to the offices where more substantial banking matters were handled. Gabriella approached the reception desk with measured steps, maintaining the perfect balance of confidence and approachability. The receptionist, a young white woman with straight blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, glanced up briefly before returning to her computer screen without acknowledgement. Gabriella stood patiently, portfolio clutched professionally at her side. 1 minute passed, then 2. The receptionist continued typing, periodically answering phone calls, but never once looking up again at Gabriella. The doors behind Gabriella opened and an older white couple entered. The receptionist immediately brightened, her fingers pausing on the keyboard as she called out, "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson. How was your trip to the Bahamas?" The couple approached the desk, standing directly beside Gabriella as if she were invisible. For 10 full minutes, the receptionist chatted with the Davidsons about their vacation, their grandchildren, and their upcoming anniversary celebration. Not once did she acknowledge Gabriella's presence or indicate that she should wait her turn. When the Davidsons finally moved on, directed toward an office with a personal escort, Gabriella still stood waiting. The doors opened again. A middle-aged white man in a golf shirt entered. Again, the receptionist immediately looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The man explained he needed to discuss investment options. Without hesitation, without even the pretense of checking an appointment book, the receptionist picked up the phone and announced to someone that an investment client needed assistance. Within moments, another staff member appeared to escort him to an advisor. Still, Gabriella waited. 27 minutes had now passed since she first approached the desk. She had been bypassed by 5 separate customers, all white, all immediately acknowledged and assisted. Finally, after helping a 6th customer who had arrived after Gabriella, the receptionist looked up with a tight, impatient expression. "Is there something you need?" she asked, her tone suggesting Gabriella was somehow inconveniencing her by standing there. With professionalism, Gabriella responded, "Good morning. I'd like to speak with someone about business banking services, please." The receptionist's eyes traveled slowly from Gabriella's face to her hair, then down to her modest handbag, and finally to her shoes, making a visible assessment. Her expression shifted from impatience to something more dismissive. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" she asked, enunciating each word with exaggerated clarity. "We're a full-service financial institution for established businesses and high-net-worth individuals. The check-cashing store down on Maple Street might be more your speed." The implication was unmistakable, the prejudice barely concealed behind a thin veneer of professional language. Gabriella had heard variations of this statement countless times throughout her career. The assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly have legitimate business at a prestigious financial institution. What the receptionist couldn't know was that the woman she was dismissing controlled investment portfolios worth more than this entire branch's annual revenue. That the woman she was suggesting should seek services elsewhere would soon be signing her paychecks. Gabriella maintained her composure, neither raising her voice nor showing the frustration that would have been entirely justified. Instead, she placed her business card on the counter, not her real card identifying her as a board member, but one she had created for this exercise, identifying her as the CEO of a modest consulting firm. "I'd like to discuss a business loan for a community development project," she said evenly. "I have projections, business plans, and references. I'd prefer to speak with the branch manager directly." The receptionist picked up the card with visible reluctance, as if touching something distasteful. She glanced at it briefly before setting it aside. "Miss Washington," she said, the forced politeness barely masking her condescension, "Miss Pierce is very busy with important clients today. If you insist on seeing her, you'll need to wait. I can't promise she'll have time for you." "I'm happy to wait," Gabriella replied. With visible annoyance, the receptionist pointed toward a seating area across the lobby. "You can wait over there. I'll let Miss Pierce know you're here when she's available." Gabriella nodded politely and made her way to the indicated area, a small collection of chairs separated from the main lobby. It was clearly the least desirable waiting section, tucked away from the contemporary art and digital displays, almost hidden behind a large potted plant. A subtle way of keeping certain customers out of the main sightline. Gabriella opened her portfolio and pretended to review her documents while actually observing the dynamics of the branch. Within moments, she noticed the shift in atmosphere her presence created. An older white woman seated nearby gathered her purse and moved to a different section, casting a suspicious glance in Gabriella's direction. 2 other customers whispered to each other, their eyes darting toward her braided hair. "So unprofessional," one woman murmured to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice enough to prevent Gabriella from hearing. "I don't understand why they can't just wear normal hair to a business setting. It's so intimidating." Her friend agreed. Makes me uncomfortable just looking at it. Gabriella had heard these comments countless times. The policing of black women's hair was so commonplace that she had developed an emotional callous against such remarks. Still, each instance reinforced why her mission today, and her larger mission as the incoming CEO, was so necessary. Financial institutions weren't just managing money. They were either reinforcing or dismantling barriers to economic equality. A young mother with a stroller entered the waiting area, glanced at Gabriella, then immediately exited, choosing to stand rather than sit near her. No logic to the reaction. Just the unconscious bias that had been programmed through generations of media stereotypes and cultural messaging. 25 minutes Gabriella sat in that waiting area, watching customer after customer arrive, receive immediate service, and depart. She observed the branch's operations, noting every efficiency and deficiency, every instance of preferential treatment, every subtle signal of who was valued and who was merely tolerated. Have you ever been treated differently in a professional setting based on your appearance? Share your experience in the comments below and hit the subscribe button now to enjoy more of these stories. As Gabriella continued to wait, watching the biased treatment unfold around her, she had no idea that the situation was about to escalate from casual discrimination to something far more horrific. After 47 minutes of waiting, nearly triple the time any white customer had waited that morning, Gabriella finally saw movement. The receptionist picked up the phone, spoke briefly, then approached the waiting area with visible reluctance. "Miss Pierce will see you now," she said, her tone suggesting this was an extraordinary accommodation rather than a basic service. "Follow me." As Gabriella gathered her portfolio and rose, she noticed several customers watching the interaction with curiosity. Their expressions suggested surprise that someone who looked like her had secured a meeting with the branch manager. These silent judgments were familiar terrain for Gabriella. The constant questioning of her legitimacy in professional spaces had been the background radiation of her entire career. The receptionist led her down a hallway lined with framed photographs of Premier Financial's historic buildings and past presidents, a visual history displaying mostly exclusively white men in positions of power. They arrived at a corner office with a nameplate reading, "Jennifer Pierce, Branch Manager," in elegant gold lettering. The door was open, revealing a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured garden. Jennifer Pierce sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, reviewing documents with theatrical focus. She was a woman in her mid-40s with expertly highlighted blonde hair styled in a sleek bob, wearing a cream-colored designer suit that conveyed both authority and privilege. When the receptionist announced Gabriella's presence, Jennifer looked up with a momentary expression of unfiltered distaste. A grimace quickly rearranged into a tight, professional smile that never reached her eyes. "Miss Washington is here about a business loan," the receptionist said, her tone subtly communicating that this was, in her assessment, a waste of the manager's valuable time. Jennifer nodded curtly. "Thank you, Amber." The receptionist departed, closing the door behind her. Gabriella stood just inside the entrance, portfolio in hand, waiting for the customary invitation to sit. It never came. "How can I help you?" Jennifer asked, remaining seated while pointedly leaving Gabriella standing, a power dynamic as old as time. In banking offices across America, potential clients were typically invited to sit, offered water or coffee, treated with the basic courtesies that signaled respect. Not today. Not for Gabriella. "Good morning, Miss Pierce," Gabriella began with the warm professionalism that had become her signature. "I'm interested in discussing business banking services, specifically financing options for a community development project I'm launching." Jennifer leaned back in her leather chair, her eyes performing the same slow, evaluative scan that the receptionist had executed earlier. A visual assessment meant to communicate that Gabriella was being measured and implicitly found wanting. "I see," Jennifer responded, her words stretched and enunciated with exaggerated clarity, as if speaking to someone who might struggle with basic English. "And do you understand how business banking works, Ms. Washington?" "Yes, I'm familiar with banking procedures," Gabriella replied evenly, choosing not to mention her extensive qualifications. That would come later. Today was about experiencing the bank's true culture when they didn't know who she was. "Well, our business services are typically designed for established enterprises with significant collateral and proven revenue streams," Jennifer continued slowly. "Given your urban background, you might find our requirements challenging to meet." There it was, the coded language that served as a thin veil for racial assumptions. Jennifer had no information about Gabriella's background. The phrase urban background was purely an assumption based on her appearance. Gabriella remained professionally composed. "I've prepared a comprehensive business plan with 5-year projections, market analysis, and detailed collateral information. I'd be happy to walk you through it." She opened her portfolio and removed the meticulously prepared documents. As she stepped forward to place them on Jennifer's desk, the branch manager made a show of leaning sideways, dramatically trying to see past Gabriella's braided hair as if it were obstructing her vision. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said with a theatrical sigh, "but would you mind standing a bit to the side? Your hair is blocking my view of my computer screen." The comment was absurd. Gabriella's braids were neatly styled and no more voluminous than any other professional hairstyle. They weren't in any way blocking Jennifer's line of sight to her monitor, which sat at a completely different angle. The remark was purely meant to call negative attention to her hair, to mark it as problematic in a professional setting. "Actually," Jennifer continued before Gabriella could respond, "we've had several customers mention that they find your hairstyle rather intimidating. We try to maintain a certain professional atmosphere at Premier Financial. Perhaps you might consider a more conventional style for future business meetings?" Each word landed like a calculated insult, designed to remind Gabriella that she was being judged by standards created specifically to exclude people who looked like her. The suggestion that her natural hair was intimidating or unprofessional was a form of discrimination that Black women faces in corporate America. "My hairstyle is professional and well-maintained," Gabriella responded calmly. "I'd prefer to focus on the business proposal I've prepared." She proceeded to outline the community development project detailed in her documents, a small business incubator designed to support minority entrepreneurs in underserved neighborhoods, providing both capital and mentorship to help build generational wealth in communities historically denied access to fair banking services. As Gabriella explained the social impact potential alongside the solid return on investment projections, Jennifer's expression shifted from dismissive to openly amused. When Gabriella finished her presentation, the branch manager actually laughed. A short, derisive sound that communicated more clearly than words ever could. "Let me get this straight," Jennifer said, making no effort to hide her condescension. "You want Premier Financial to invest in businesses in, what did you call them? Underserved communities?" "That's a creative euphemism." She leaned forward, dropping any pretense of professionalism. "Miss Washington, are you planning to open a hair salon in the hood? Because that seems more aligned with your expertise than financial services." The comment hung in the air. Blatant, undisguised racism delivered with the confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for such behavior. It was a moment that would have justified outrage, that would have given Gabriella every right to respond with the full force of her true identity and position. For a moment, Gabriella considered revealing exactly who she was, Imagine the satisfaction of watching Jennifer's smug expression dissolve into horror as she realized she had just insulted her future boss. The words formed in her mind, "Actually, Miss Pierce, I should introduce myself properly. I'm Gabriella Washington, newly appointed board member and incoming CEO of Premier Financial's parent company." The revelation would have been immediately satisfying, but as Gabriella opened her mouth to speak, Gabriella made a strategic decision. Revealing her identity now would create immediate consequences for Jennifer, but it would also potentially alert the broader organization to her undercover assessment. More importantly, it would cut short this branch evaluation before she could see just how far the discrimination would go. If Jennifer was this comfortable expressing racist views in a first meeting with a potential client, what else was happening at this branch that Gabriella needed to uncover? "I'd still like to discuss the specific loan products you offer," Gabriella said instead, choosing to see how deep this discrimination ran. "Could you provide information about your small business loan requirements?" Jennifer Pierce tapped her manicured fingernails against her mahogany desk, her expression hardening as she examined Gabriella's business proposal. Without looking up, she slid the documents back across the desk. "Before we can proceed with any discussion of business services, I'll need to verify your identity more thoroughly," Jennifer announced. "Bank policy for new clients, especially for requests involving significant funding." This was the first direct lie. Premier Financial had no such policy requiring additional identification for initial consultations. "Of course," Gabriella replied calmly, reaching into her handbag and producing her driver's license. "I understand the need for proper verification." Jennifer took the license and studied it with exaggerated scrutiny, her eyes narrowing. The photo on Gabriella's license had been taken 3 years earlier, showing her with chemically straightened hair, the corporate style she had maintained throughout much of her career before embracing her natural hair. "This doesn't look like you at all," Jennifer declared, her voice laced with manufactured suspicion. She held up the license, pointing to the photo. "The person in this ID has straight hair and looks more well-fed than you. Your appearance is completely different." The assumption that changing from straight to natural hair somehow constituted identity fraud was absurd to Gabriella. "That's me in the photo," Gabriella explained evenly. "I wore my hair differently when that picture was taken, and I've equally lost some weight. As you can see, the facial features match perfectly." Jennifer's eyes remained cold. "I'll need to see additional identification. A passport, perhaps? And a credit card with your name on it." Again, Gabriella complied, producing her passport and a credit card. Each time she presented identification, Jennifer found new reasons to question its authenticity, or Gabriella's identity. When the passport photo also showed straightened hair, Jennifer's suspicion appeared to deepen rather than resolve. "These discrepancies are concerning," Jennifer said, her voice taking on a performative professionalism that barely masked her hostility. "The banking industry has strict protocols about identity verification. I'm sure you understand." While maintaining eye contact with Gabriella, Jennifer reached beneath her desk and pressed a button, a silent security alert. The action was subtle but purposeful, intended to be noticed. It was an escalation, a power move designed to intimidate. "Is there a problem with my identification?" Gabriella asked, though she knew exactly what was happening. She had now presented 3 forms of government-issued ID, all clearly showing the same person, all clearly legitimate. "Let's just say I have concerns," Jennifer replied with thin-lipped condescension. "When identification doesn't match appearance, we have protocols to follow." Within moments, the office door opened without a knock. A security guard, a tall white man with a military-style haircut, appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here, Miss Pierce?" he asked, his hand resting casually near the taser at his belt, his eyes immediately focusing on Gabriella with unwarranted suspicion. Jennifer turned to him with practiced concern. "We may have a situation, Dave. I'm dealing with a potential case of identity fraud. Would you mind staying close by while I sort this out?" The security guard nodded, taking up position just inside the doorway, his presence transforming what should have been a routine banking consultation into something that felt increasingly threatening. "There's been a misunderstanding," Gabriella said calmly. "My identification is legitimate. I'm here to discuss business services." Jennifer ignored her explanation entirely. "I'll need to make some calls to verify these documents," she announced, picking up her desk phone while nodding meaningfully to the security guard. What happened next elevated the situation from standard discrimination to something far more public and humiliating. As Jennifer was speaking quietly into the phone, her office door opened again. This time, it was an elderly white woman, the same customer who had moved away from Gabriella in the waiting area earlier. "Excuse me," the woman interrupted loudly, addressing Jennifer while pointedly ignoring Gabriella's presence. "I couldn't help but notice this person was brought into your office and I wanted to express my concerns." Jennifer set down the phone, her expression shifting to one of solicitous concern. "What concerns you, Mrs. Hoffman?" The elderly woman, emboldened by Jennifer's receptiveness, continued with increasing volume, clearly intending for her words to carry. "I've been banking here for 30 years, and I've never felt unsafe until today. That woman's hair looks like it could be hiding anything. Who knows what she's concealed in there? Weapons? Recording devices? It's intimidating and threatening to other customers." This outlandish assertion, that Gabriella's braided hair could somehow conceal dangerous items, would have been laughable if it weren't so deeply rooted in racist stereotypes and ignorance. It was a claim no one would ever make about a white woman's hairstyle, no matter how voluminous or elaborate. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. "I understand your concerns, Mrs. Hoffman. Rest assured, we're taking appropriate security measures." "Well, I should hope so," the older woman continued, growing more animated. "This isn't the type of clientele Premier Financial used to attract. I remember when this was a respectable establishment." The implication was unmistakable, the racism barely veiled. And Jennifer Pierce, rather than moderating this inappropriate intervention, was actively encouraging it. Throughout this extraordinary display, Gabriella remained seated, her posture straight, her expression composed. Lesser individuals might have erupted in justifiable anger or fled the humiliating scene. But Gabriella Washington had navigated hostile environments her entire professional life. She understood that her reactions would be scrutinized, that any display of emotion would be weaponized against her. When Mrs. Hoffman finally finished her tirade and departed with a self-satisfied huff, Gabriella addressed Jennifer directly. "I'd like to see your anti-discrimination policy, please," she requested, her voice steady and professional. The request was like dropping a stone into still water. Jennifer's practiced expression faltered momentarily, surprise registering in her eyes before she recovered her composure. "Excuse me?" she replied, her tone suggesting Gabriella had said something outlandish. "Premier Financial's anti-discrimination policy," Gabriella repeated. "Federal law requires all financial institutions to maintain such policies. I'd like to review your branch's specific guidelines." As she spoke, Gabriella discreetly tapped a sequence on her smartwatch, a pre-programmed emergency alert that would send her location and a distress signal to her executive team and several board members. It wasn't a panicked response, but a calculated decision. Whatever happened next, she wanted it documented. Jennifer's face hardened, any pretense of professionalism now completely abandoned. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but I can assure you that Premier Financial treats all qualified customers equally." The operative word being qualified. She gestured toward the security guard who stepped closer to Gabriella's chair. A second guard appeared in the doorway, responding to Jennifer's earlier silent alarm. "Dave, John, please stay close," Jennifer instructed them. "I'm concerned about where this conversation is heading." Then, turning back to Gabriella, she continued with increasing boldness. "Let me be frank, Miss Washington, if that's really your name. When you come into an establishment like Premier Financial, there are certain standards of appearance and behavior that we expect. The problem isn't your identification," Jennifer continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone. "It's your failure to present yourself in a manner appropriate for this institution. Your hair, your attitude, these unprofessional elements suggest you're not a good fit for Premier Financial's services." As Jennifer spoke, the two security guards moved to position themselves on either side of Gabriella's chair, a clear intimidation tactic. The office door remained open, allowing other bank employees and customers to witness Gabriella's humiliation. This was the moment when most people would have revealed their true identity, when the temptation to drop the bombshell that would instantly transform the power dynamic would become overwhelming. But something in Gabriella held her back. She wanted to see exactly how far Jennifer Pierce would go when she believed she was untouchable. She couldn't have known that her decision to remain silent about her true identity would lead to an act of humiliation so extreme that it would shock the banking industry. "Get out of my office now," Jennifer shouted at Gabriella, but Gabriella stood firm, insisting on being attended to, and that made Jennifer think of making an example of her to break her ego. As the security guards closed in around her, Gabriella maintained her dignity and composure. She was no longer just a banking executive conducting an undercover assessment. She was becoming a witness to injustice, documenting behaviors that would soon lead to one of the most dramatic reckonings in corporate America. "I believe we're done here," Jennifer Pierce declared, her voice laced with finality as she signaled to the security guards. "This person is attempting to commit fraud at our institution." What happened next unfolded with a terrifying military precision that suggested this wasn't the first time such an incident had occurred at Premier Financial's Westfield branch. Without warning, both security guards moved in perfect synchronization, each grabbing one of Gabriella's arms and yanking her forcefully from the chair. The sudden, violent movement caught Gabriella off guard. Despite her composed exterior, she hadn't expected to be physically assaulted in a bank, a public institution in broad daylight. The force of their grip caused her to lose hold of her phone, which clattered to the floor and skidded beneath Jennifer's desk, effectively eliminating her ability to document what was happening. "What are you doing? Take your hands off me," Gabriella demanded, her professional calm finally cracking under the physical assault. For the first time since entering the bank, a genuine alarm crept into her voice. This was escalating beyond discrimination into something far more sinister. The security guards tightened their grip, their fingers digging into the flesh of her arms with enough pressure to leave bruises, marks that would be photographed later as evidence. They lifted her slightly, keeping her feet barely touching the ground to prevent her from gaining stability or leverage. Jennifer Pierce, rather than showing any concern about this disproportionate use of force, appeared energized by the confrontation. A cold smile spread across her face as she stepped from behind her desk, straightening her cream-colored jacket as if preparing for a public appearance. This wasn't a regrettable security incident to be handled discreetly. This was a performance, a display of power meant to be witnessed. "Bring her to the lobby," Jennifer instructed the guards, leading the way as they half-dragged Gabriella from the office. The main lobby of Premier Financial fell silent as the bizarre procession emerged. Two large security guards restraining a professional black woman in a business suit, followed by the poised blonde branch manager, who appeared to be orchestrating the scene. Customers froze mid-transaction. Tellers stopped counting cash. Every eye in the building turned to witness what was unfolding. Jennifer Pierce stepped forward into the center of the lobby, assuming a position of authority as if addressing shareholders at an annual meeting. Her voice projected clearly across the marble expanse, designed to reach every corner of the space. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to your banking experience today," she announced with practiced precision. "This is what happens when people try to commit fraud in my bank. We take security very seriously at Premier Financial." She paused, allowing her words to land with their full weight, ensuring that everyone present would associate Gabriella's face with criminal behavior. It was character assassination in real time. A public branding with no evidence, no due process, no opportunity for defense. Then, turning to the guards with a chilling calmness that suggested premeditation, she delivered the instruction that would soon make headlines across the country. "Make sure she won't be mistaken for someone else again." The command hung in the air for a moment, its meaning not immediately clear to the onlookers. But Jennifer's next actions clarified her intentions with horrifying clarity. She walked purposefully to her assistant's desk, opened a drawer, and removed a pair of scissors. Standard office scissors with black handles and stainless steel blades, ordinary objects that were about to be weaponized in an extraordinary act of racial violence. "Hold her still," Jennifer commanded as she approached Gabriella with the scissors open, their metal surfaces catching the light from the lobby's chandeliers. The reality of what was about to happen dawned on Gabriella with a sickening clarity. "Stop this immediately," she demanded, her voice rising with genuine alarm as she struggled against the guard's restraint. "You have no right to touch me. This is assault." Her protests echoed through the lobby, but not a single customer or employee moved to intervene. Some watched in shocked silence. Others averted their eyes, unwilling to witness but equally unwilling to object. A few even nodded in approval, their faces reflecting the same biases that had empowered Jennifer Pierce's actions. With the calculated precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind, Jennifer Pierce began cutting through Gabriella's braids. The severed braids fell to the marble floor of the bank with soft, devastating thuds. Tears streamed down Gabriella's face as she endured this public humiliation. The physical pain was minimal. The scissors cut hair, not skin, but the emotional violence was immeasurable. "This is a hate crime," Gabriella said through tears, her voice steady despite the emotion flooding through her. "You are committing a hate crime in front of witnesses." Jennifer continued cutting, unmoved by Gabriella's distress or the gravity of her actions. "This is ensuring that your ID matches your appearance," she replied coldly, her voice carrying enough for bystanders to hear her justification. "Now there won't be any confusion about who you are. If you were in Gabriella's shoes, what would you have done next after your braids were cut by a bank staff? Comment your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe now to enjoy more of these stories." The cutting continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than 2 minutes. Throughout this assault, despite the trauma unfolding, Gabriella maintained enough presence of mind to press an emergency sequence on her smartwatch, a different code than she had used earlier. This signal transmitted not just her location, but access codes to the bank's security camera system directly to the board members of Premier Financial. It was a fail-safe she had programmed before beginning her branch visits, a digital panic button that would provide irrefutable evidence of her experience. The tiny green confirmation light on her watch was the only thing giving her hope in this moment of profound degradation. When Jennifer had cut enough of Gabriella's hair to satisfy her cruelty, leaving her with uneven patches and exposed scalp in places, she stepped back with a self-satisfied expression, admiring her handiwork as if she'd completed a difficult task with particular skill. "Now your appearance matches your ID," she announced to the silent lobby. "Escort her out." The guards dragged Gabriella through the lobby, past shocked customers who recorded the scene on their phones but did nothing to intervene. Their grip remained punishingly tight, as if they expected this professional woman in business attire to suddenly become violent, another manifestation of the stereotypes that had driven this entire incident. At the front entrance, they pushed her roughly outside, causing her to stumble on the steps. One guard returned to the building momentarily, retrieving her portfolio and handbag, which he threw onto the sidewalk with deliberate disrespect, the contents spilling out beside her. "Don't come back here with that fake ID," he called after her with unnecessary volume, ensuring her humiliation would extend to passers-by on the street. "We know what you look like now." Gabriella stumbled to her car, her professional outfit now disheveled, her hair partially destroyed, her dignity assaulted in ways she had never experienced, despite decades navigating predominantly white corporate spaces. Her hands trembled as she pressed the unlock button on her key fob, missing it twice before successfully opening the door. Once inside, with the doors locked and the privacy glass separating her from public view, the armor of composure she had maintained finally shattered. For 2 minutes, Gabriella Washington broke down completely. The sobs came from deep within her chest, primal sounds of pain that had nothing to do with the accomplished executive and everything to do with the human being who had just been treated as less than human. She covered her mouth to muffle the sound, a lifetime habit of hiding vulnerability, even now when she was alone. When those 2 minutes ended, a disciplined allocation of time for emotion that had served her throughout her career, Gabriella straightened her spine, dried her eyes, and reached for her professional reserve. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, confronting the damage to her appearance unflinchingly. Where her carefully braided hair had been, irregular patches remained, some areas cut brutally close to her scalp. It was impossible to disguise, impossible to normalize. The reflection staring back at her was wounded but undefeated, the visible evidence of racism impossible to ignore or explain away. With steady hands now, she made 3 calls. The first to her attorney, providing a precise, detailed account of what had transpired, requesting immediate legal action against Jennifer Pierce and the security guards. The second to the board chairman, Harold Greenway, who was already calling her when she attempted to reach him. The third to her personal assistant, arranging for a hair care specialist to meet her at her hotel. Across town, board members of Premier Financial were reacting with horror to the security footage now streaming to their devices. The camera angles captured everything: Jennifer's dismissive treatment, the escalation, the public humiliation, and most damning of all, the cutting of Gabriella's hair while she was physically restrained. The chairman, Harold Greenway, a 68-year-old veteran of the banking industry who had personally recruited Gabriella to lead the company into a more inclusive future, watched open-mouthed as one of his branch managers assaulted a woman he immediately recognized as their incoming CEO. "My God," he whispered, immediately activating the emergency board protocol that would convene all members within the hour. His assistant entered at his urgent buzzing. "Get legal on the line immediately," he instructed, "and have my car brought around. We have a catastrophe unfolding." Meanwhile, inside Premier Financial's Westfield branch, the atmosphere had shifted from the triumphant aftermath of Jennifer's power display to something increasingly uneasy. The customers who had witnessed the incident had departed quickly, some already posting accounts on social media that were gaining traction. The employees moved with nervous energy, exchanging concerned glances as their uncertainty grew. Jennifer's phone began ringing incessantly. First her direct line, then her cell phone, then the general branch number, all simultaneously. her email inbox filled with urgent messages from corporate headquarters, all marked "immediate action required" in subject lines that grew increasingly alarming. The regional director was demanding a video call. The head of security for the entire organization was requesting access to the branch's camera footage. The legal department was sending document preservation notices. Jennifer's confident demeanor began to crack as she sensed something had gone terribly wrong. The same employees who had tacitly supported her actions an hour earlier now avoided eye contact, distancing themselves as they sensed the shifting winds. One of the security guards, Dave, had returned to his station and, troubled by what had just occurred, decided to search Gabriella Washington's name online. It was a simple act of due diligence that should have been performed before any confrontation, standard security protocol that had been bypassed in the rush to judgment. His face drained of color as the search results populated his screen. There she was, Gabriella Washington, Harvard MBA, Wall Street powerhouse, recently appointed board member and incoming CEO of Premier Financial's parent company. Her professional biography was accompanied by awards, speaking engagements, and financial industry accolades. "Oh no," he whispered, looking toward Jennifer's office where she was now frantically answering calls. "What have we done?" He quickly showed the search results to his colleague. Both men now understanding that their careers were likely over. They had participated in the assault of their future CEO based solely on the biased judgment of a branch manager they had trusted without question. 30 minutes later, Gabriella sat in her hotel room as a professional stylist carefully assessed the damage to her hair. The woman's gentle hands moved with respect and care, a stark contrast to the violation Gabriella had experienced at the bank. "We can even it out," the stylist said gently, her voice filled with the compassion of someone who understood exactly what this kind of attack meant to a black woman. "Create a shorter style until it grows back. I can minimize the appearance of damage." Gabriella looked at her reflection, at the uneven patches where her beautiful braids had been hacked away, at the visible evidence of the discrimination that millions of black women faced daily, but that rarely left such undeniable physical proof. In that moment, she made a decision that would define the next chapter of this unfolding story. "No," she decided firmly, her voice finding new strength. "I don't want to hide what they did to me. When I return to that bank, I want everyone to see exactly what happened. I want Jennifer Pierce to look at me and see the consequence of her actions. I want the evidence visible and undeniable." The stylist nodded with understanding, making only minimal adjustments to prevent further damage without concealing the assault that had occurred. As she prepared for her return, Gabriella's phone buzzed continuously with messages from board members expressing their outrage and support. The chairman himself had arranged to meet her at the bank with the entire executive leadership team. Legal counsel had already filed preliminary charges. Public relations was preparing for a storm of media attention. Jennifer Pierce was about to learn exactly who she had assaulted, and the reckoning would be swift, public, and career-ending. But more importantly, Premier Financial was about to undergo a fundamental transformation under Gabriella Washington's leadership, one that would address the systemic issues that had allowed such discrimination to flourish unchecked. The cutting of her hair had been meant to humiliate and dehumanize her. Instead, it would become the catalyst for institutional change that would affect thousands of employees and millions of customers. 1 hour after being thrown out of Premier Financial, a convoy of 3 black luxury vehicles pulled up to the front entrance. The bank employees watched with growing concern as board members in expensive suits emerged, forming a protective circle around Gabriella Washington as she exited the last car. She walked toward the bank with her head held high, making no attempt to hide her partially cut hair. Flanked by the board chairman, Harold Greenway, on one side, and the company's chief legal counsel on the other, Gabriella exuded calm authority. Behind them followed 6 other board members and executives, creating an unmistakable show of corporate force. As they entered the lobby, Jennifer Pierce was speaking with a customer at the reception desk. When she looked up and recognized Gabriella, her face drained of color. The portfolio in her hands dropped to the floor, scattering papers. For a moment, she stood frozen in disbelief, then turned abruptly and tried to retreat to her office. "Miss Pierce," called Chairman Greenway, his authoritative voice stopping her mid-stride. "Please remain in the lobby." Jennifer halted, visibly trembling as the full realization of her situation began to dawn on her. The security guards who had participated in Gabriella's humiliation now stood awkwardly at their posts, uncertain what to do as corporate leadership filled the branch. Chairman Greenway walked to the reception desk and picked up the telephone connected to the bank's PA system. His voice resonated throughout the building as he made a public announcement. "Attention all Premier Financial customers and employees. I am Harold Greenway, Chairman of the Board. I must inform you of a deeply disturbing incident that occurred in this branch today. The woman who was forcibly removed and assaulted earlier is Gabriella Washington, newly appointed majority shareholder and incoming CEO of Premier Financial. Ms. Washington was conducting an undercover assessment of our branches when she was subjected to discriminatory treatment and physical assault today." The lobby fell completely silent as customers and employees processed this revelation. Jennifer stood paralyzed, her career flashing before her eyes. Among the customers, reactions varied dramatically. Several appeared horrified, covering their mouths in shock as they realized they had witnessed the assault of their bank's CEO. Others looked down in shame, recognizing their complicity in remaining silent. Near the exit, Mrs. Hoffman, the elderly woman who had complained about Gabriella's hair, attempted to slip away unnoticed. As she reached for the door, Gabriella stepped forward. "Mrs. Hoffman," she called, her voice firm but calm. "You can't leave yet." The elderly woman froze, then reluctantly turned back, unable to meet Gabriella's eyes. Gabriella nodded to an IT specialist who had accompanied the board members. Within moments, the security footage from earlier appeared on all digital displays throughout the lobby. Every customer and employee was forced to witness what had happened. The discrimination, the physical restraint, Jennifer cutting Gabriella's hair while she was held down, and her being thrown out of the bank. The footage played without commentary, the visual evidence speaking for itself. When it ended, Jennifer stepped forward, her voice shaking with desperation. "I was following protocol for suspected fraud," she insisted. Her identification didn't match her appearance. "I was protecting the bank's interests." Gabriella raised her hand, silencing Jennifer mid-sentence. The entire lobby went quiet. "Let me be clear about what happened today," Gabriella said, her voice steady and authoritative. "I was subjected to racial discrimination from the moment I entered this branch. I was ignored at reception, while white customers who arrived after me received immediate service. When I finally spoke with Miss Pierce, she made derogatory comments about my hair, my professional qualifications, and my urban background, a term she used without knowing anything about where I grew up." Gabriella moved closer to Jennifer, who seemed to shrink with each approaching step. "You violated Premier Financial's anti-discrimination policies, federal banking regulations, and basic human decency. You authorized an assault against me that was rooted in racist stereotypes about black women's hair. Your actions weren't protecting this bank. They were harming it and everything it should stand for." Chairman Greenway stepped forward, addressing Jennifer directly. "Jennifer Pierce, your employment with Premier Financial is terminated effective immediately. The same applies to the security personnel involved in this incident and the receptionist." He gestured to two corporate security officers who had arrived with them. "Please escort Miss Pierce to her office to collect personal items, then off the premises." Gabriella added, "Please remove your personal items within 15 minutes, just as you gave me no time to explain who I was." As Jennifer was led away, Gabriella's lawyer addressed the remaining customers and staff. Criminal charges for assault and civil rights violations are being filed against the individuals involved. Additionally, all customer accounts will be reviewed, particularly those who actively participated in today's discrimination. Premier Financial cannot and will not do business with clients who engage in discriminatory behavior towards others. At this announcement, Mrs. Hoffman clutched her purse tightly, her face flushed with embarrassment. "This isn't just about one incident or one branch," Gabriella addressed everyone. "What happened today represents a culture that we will transform completely. Premier Financial will become an institution where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, not just those who fit certain appearances or backgrounds." Jennifer was escorted out the front doors and arrested for assault, and Gabriella took control of the bank and made sure new laws were set to ensure what happened to her never repeated itself again. If you enjoyed this story, hit the subscribe button, and share with others to learn too. Our next story is one you shouldn't miss.